فاطمة الحبابي. Welcome, everyone. I am pleased to welcome on behalf of the CEO of Trends Advisory and Research, Dr. Mohammed Al Ali. I welcome all the participants and the speakers of this seminar about the 2021 Iraqi parliamentary elections, challenges and opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, the elections that will be early in Iraq are about to start, and the government of Iraq decided to hold these elections after the protests that spread over the cities of Iraq. And of course, there is an intention to fight corruption and a lot of crises in the Iraqi cities, and usually the elections were due to take place in 2022. However, these early elections have been an emergency, and they were a reaction to the protest that took place in the streets of the Iraqi cities, and some of the protesters wanted to change the regime. And many are betting on the fact that these elections can make the change that is needed. These elections will be the first step on the path, and there should be other steps following these elections. In this seminar, we will shed light on the challenges of these elections and also the map of the political actors in these elections, and we will discuss the impact of regional powers and actors internationally. Also, we will discuss the influence of international actors. We know that Iraq is striving to return to the Arab world space, and of course, there are gradual steps in this trend and direction. Now, I give the floor to Sultan Al Ali to moderate this seminar. Thank you very much, Fatima Al Hababi, for this welcoming speech. And I would like to welcome as well the speakers that are participating with us in this seminar about 2021 Iraqi parliamentary election challenges and opportunities.
Thank you for attending this e-symposium that sheds light on the fifth Iraqi parliament election since 2005. These elections are of particular importance given that it comes under circumstances different than those of previous elections, especially in regards to the existence of a new electoral law, and after a popular protest broke out. That led on the resignation of the government of former Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi. Hence, these recent developments are expected to have a significant impact on the course of the current election and the result they are expected to produce. This will be focus of our conversation today to discuss the extent of change that Iraqi will ever likely witness after this election. Now, let me give the floor to our first speaker, Dr. Bilal Wahab, who will be speaking of the subject mapping political forces and network of the internal electoral alliance. Dr. Bilal Wahab is an expert of Iraqi affairs and in the Nathan Easter Wagner Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy in the United States. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sultan, and I'm grateful for Trends to host me today and to be in the company of great minds like Dr. Munqidh, Dr. Lauer, Dr. Raed, and Dr. Huda. The story of the election that will be held next week is one of the power of the Iraqi street, and I might narrow it down to the power of Iraqi youth. In 2018, there was an election that was marred by fraud and irregularities that brought to power a new dynamic, new forces into the Iraqi parliament that shifted the balance of power from traditional classical political parties that managed to gain most of their legitimacy and renown by being the diaspora opposition to Saddam Hussein. But that dynamic primarily shifted in 2018 in favor of non-sectarian alliances, division within the traditional Kurdish, Sunni, and Shia communities, but most importantly, in favor of Shia militias, primarily Shia militias, who successfully translated their role in the fight against ISIS into political force and into seats in the Iraqi parliament. That transition gave rise to a new form of politics, one that exacerbated the corruption and the patronage politics that Iraq has been characterized with since 2005, the first elections in 2005, whereby you have a mismatch. The main mismatch in Iraqi politics is one between a political system that was primarily designed by these forces whose main fear, whose main goal was not so much governance as to deny the emergence of another dictatorship. Put differently, the drafters of the Iraqi constitution, the designers of today's political system in Iraq, had an ideology, had a background, perhaps also a psychology, a fear of another Saddam Hussein emerging in Iraq. So the constitution, and that applies on the Kurds and the Shias that were better organized in the process of drafting the constitution, to design a system that is intentionally built in to be weak. And therefore, this government, while it has been successful in barring a dictator like Saddam Hussein from re-emerging, the negative side effect has been an utter failure in governance, in service delivery, in translating Iraq's wealth into oil wealth, that is, into prosperity for the Iraqi people, and most importantly, to translate Iraq's wealth into job opportunities for a youth bulge that Iraq is experiencing. 60% of the Iraqi population are under the age of 25. And that means a variety of implications, one of which is that this system that I described, one that is designed to deny the emergence of a dictator, doesn't really make a lot of sense to this younger generation who don't have much of a recollection of what that means, of Saddam Hussein and that tyrannical regime. What they expect from this government is to deliver on services, to deliver on accountability, and I think most importantly, to deliver on jobs. So that's the first mismatch, a system that is premised on barring the rise of a dictatorship versus the aspirations of a increasingly young population that wants to live in a country that matches the expectations of millions of barrels of oil in a region that is prosperous, and those demands are not being met by this political system. One of the reasons of the failure of the governance is that this political system allows for everyone to be part of the government. There is no incentive for opposition to be in parliament. It's all of the governments since 2005 have been big tent governments, inclusive of all the political parties, of all of the different sects. And the name of the game doesn't put a premium on accountability and good governance and service delivery, but rather on making it to the government and then tapping into the government resources, which is primarily from oil sales revenues, and then doling out those patronage jobs and patronage contracts to cronies and supporters, and that way staying in the political game, staying as part of this political process. And that has rendered elections rather meaningless if the goal of elections is the competition of ideas and the competition of platforms towards serving the people. The addition and the increasing role of the militias in the parliament has also further delegitimized the Iraqi government, delegitimize the priorities of the Iraqi state in service of the people by injecting foreign influence. By many Iraqis see their government serving foreign influence and foreign agendas more than agendas and priorities of the Iraqi people. And that takes me to the second form of politics in Iraq. When the parliamentary and electoral politics has failed so far to deliver, and then election after election, the game seems to be rigged against those who have a different platform and want to fail to enter parliament just based on their ideas, and a political system that favors those with guns and money. Iraq has witnessed a different form of politics, which I called a parallel form of politics, and that's street protests. There have been seasonal protests in Iraq from all parts of Iraq, in Kurdistan, in the West, in the center. But then most importantly, in 2019, in October of 2019, the Tishreen October, Tishreen, which is the Arabic Iraqi word for October, there were mass protests throughout central and southern Iraq. And that was a game changer. It was a game changer in the sense that it pushed a government to resign. It forced the prime minister change. And it brought about this new government of Mustafa al-Kadhimi, whose mandate was to hold early elections, which are taking place next week. And that is why we have early elections in 2021 and not next year, as you mentioned, Mr. Sultan. The story of the protest is one of the power of the youth who feel practically disenfranchised from the electoral process, and they found a new way of pressuring the government and demanding change of the government. And it's a force to be reckoned with. And it's also an outright and very vocal opposition to the kind of foreign influence that the militias bring in by having a foot in the government that bestows legitimacy on them, but then having a foot outside of government that makes them answer to perhaps a foreign power or a larger power than Iraqi national interests. Allow me to make a couple of points on where US policy fits in this, since I'm speaking from Washington. In the past, Washington might have had the chance of participating or influencing the game itself, or influencing the horse trading that usually starts after the election. But Washington is transitioning from an occupying power into an assisting power, and then by 2022 into a very small military footprint that focuses on training and equipping and assisting the Iraqi army. So it doesn't have the ability to pick winners and losers anymore. So therefore, it would be wiser for Washington to, rather than ask demands of a certain individual or a leader, to make asks of the entirety of the system, one. And two, to mind the priorities of the Iraqi public rather than the Iraqi political elite alone, and cater to the needs of the Iraqi street that have become a very powerful force, one that even the Marja'iyya of Najaf, Grand Ayatollah Sistani, has to cater to, as we saw in 2020. So with that, I conclude, and I look forward to my colleagues' comments, and perhaps later to the questions and the answers. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bilal, for this informative perspective. It was quite fruitful. والآن سيكون معنا في هذا.
Now we will welcome in this seminar another speaker who will talk about challenges and opportunities, Dr. منقذ داغر ودكتور منقذ داغر، مدير منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا وعضو مجلس إدارة مؤسسة جالوب الدولية. You have the floor, doctor. Peace be upon you.
I just would like to correct one thing. The Gallup International, the headquarters is not in Washington, but it's in Switzerland. So just to get straight to the point about the elections and the circumstances around it and what is expected from it. As you know, the political system in Iraq has been designed after 2003 so that the elections and the boxes for votes is the way for the government to start its working and to form and formulate the government. And of course, it's a way of the democratic process to take place. Up until that time, since 2003, up until now, this this specific regime or system have failed for a number of reasons. This system were not able to be responsive enough to the change that has been demanded by the Iraqi people. Therefore, in 2019, the uprising have happened, and it happened for the first time in Iraq, aiming to overthrow the government. The youth in Iraq felt for the first time that they can change the government, they can change and force the House of Representatives or the Parliament to change the electoral law. But the irony here was that the youth who have been doing the uprising in 2019, who have demanded change, one of its demands have been the early elections as a mean for change, and it's of course a positive thing on their behalf because they want to have change happening in a peaceful manner. Yet the irony was that back then the political powers were against this specific demand, but under the continuous demand of the people, they have agreed on an early election. Yet the irony is that those who have demanded the early elections have boycotted it, or at least most of them have boycotted, especially in the southern region. They have declared they're boycotting. They are going to boycott the elections, and there has been certain speculations that on the day of election, some sort of escalation may happen to minimize the participation. Whilst the political powers who have been against in the early stage, who have been against in the early elections, they are now the ones who are keen on this election, and that is this specific indicator is an unhealthy one, since the elections are set or held for the need of change. But if those who are claiming change are going to boycott it, that's a problem. Specifically, if the results, and of course this is expected, is that the results may be against the will of the youth. And that is, of course, is going to add fuel to the fire, as they say. That was supposed to be under the ashes by now, so we believe that probably certain escalations may happen after the elections, of course, due to these outcomes or expected outcomes. The elections in itself is going to unfold based on the turnout or the participation ratio. Therefore, you will see that since a long time, for the first time, the reference the Najat is actually focusing on the increase of participation based on the statement that has been issued in September to encourage the voters in the Shia districts to participate. And of course, these districts are the districts in which the uprising have been occurring, and that is of course to we have now the reference in the Iraqi government as well as the UN. Therefore, this statement have been issued to increase the participation ratio, because without these, without the ratio, this ratio of participation, according to the, if the voters do not go and vote, the current status quo is going to keep on happening, and therefore the statement have been issued on the 29th of September. The statistics that we have conducted shows that the transformation ratio does not exceed from 5 to 10% in general for the turnout, the expected turnout for the elections. It is going to remain between the Sunni and Shia and Kurds, the regions. It's going to remain law. The new electoral system makes it near impossible for any researcher, for any type of research to predict the results of the election as well as the turnout. And therefore, as we all know, that it has been, the Iraq is divided into 83 constituents, and all of the expected numbers or the predictions that you read now are not scientific, and you cannot rely on them, because from a scientific point of view currently, according to the system, you cannot really do a survey or a scan by which you can predict the results. But through our because we are a specialized organization, we tried our best to come up with numbers that may be as close as possible to the reality. We have in this regard 3 points. The first one is the Electoral Commission, due to the extreme pressure it is going through, the independent Electoral Commission was actually under extreme pressure. Therefore, they want to come out at least from the media perspective as though they have succeeded in their mission, because their main mandate of the elections or for the candidates is to, or for the mission itself, is to be successful. But therefore, they have come up with probably some of the decisions that may not seem reasonable. For example, the voting would be calculated based on those who own the biometric card or the electronic card only. And the Commission's estimate number, the exact number is not known, but according to the Commission, is probably 60%, or to be specific, 57% of those have the electoral cards, and around 30% or 35% have the electronic cards. And these are the candidates who are the voters who can actually vote. And not all of the people or the categories of the people is represented. Those who are under 18 years old, those who don't have the documents or the cards will not be able to vote. So we cannot really decide or know exactly the number of the Iraqis who have both of the documents, the electoral card and the biometric card, or the electronic card. So we don't know how many of Iraqi people own both or have both. So we cannot really calculate. So if you just allow us, we have only 2 minutes left. So the Commission actually made us feel a bit of loss in this part, or in this regard. One more point, due to a very complicated mathematical problems that we have done, is that the percentage of the elections is going to be from 35 to 40. Kurds are going to have the highest votes, despite the fact that 3 weeks ago the result was different. Currently, the result is the result says that Kurds are going to have the biggest share in the voting, and probably from 40 to 50 of the Kurds are going to vote. Shias, due to the Sistani statement, the percentage have increased. Previously, they were on the bottom of the list. Currently, we are expecting around 35% of Shias to participate. Sunnis also are going to participate by from 30 to 40%, but in general, it is not going, the election is not going to have a major radical change for a number of reasons. Therefore, we cannot expect a drastic change. We have a major problem here, which is the confidence in the political system or the elections in general. Therefore, we expect that the losers are going to doubt the whole process, and those who are boycotting the election, especially the young people, will find the excuse to probably call for a re-election, and therefore I hope things would not turn out this way. But if that happened, it's going to lead Iraq to an unknown destination. So thank you very much for for your participation. Dr. Huda Naimi, please go ahead. Peace be upon you all. Thank you for Trends and the other speakers. I hope I would stick to the time limit. I would like to start where Dr. Munder, finished. It's about the current system, the governing system in Iraq. In the beginning, let me remind me that the political system in Iraq has been based on the shares, or we have seen that different political parties, Sunni Shia and otherwise, are thinking or talking about new opportunities in the political system different than what was happening in 2003. So currently, Iraqis are considering themselves according to the diverse population, which is of course consisted of a number of sections, and that of course shows that what is happening now is that a new confidence or trust issue, which is represented in the fact that the Iraqi individual would now only think through the party that they are affiliated to or with, and so the elections currently, if it's going to go under the current region, it's not going to lead to the aspired democratic implementation of the policy. And of course, we know it's voting ballots, and it's going to lead into the choice or the formation of the government, and hopefully it's supposed to be a preparation for the country to work on these different factors, which is in regards to the democratic system. As for Iraq now, the elections, of course, is going to go through a number of the foreign interferences from east and west. Iraq is a target from other countries, whether they are neighboring countries or international parties. Therefore, we're going to witness more interference one way or the other in the political and the electoral system in general, or process in general, and how would this election is going to lead to the coming government formation, as who is going to have the lead in making an alliance who can guarantee them the biggest number of seats in the parliament in order for them to be able to form the coming government. I would like also to note the fact that the Iraqi people is suffering from a lack of confidence and trust. Specifically, even on the new political faces that have been now on the political scene, there is a state of ignorance with the political situation, as well as lack of confidence and trust. Therefore, there has been a manager as well as political, social, all of these measurements or systems that are currently going in Iraq cannot help with the establishment of a democratic and a democratic system or state, or democratic system, as well as a because now people are talking about the idea of having a dictatorship or an individual taking control of the decision, as opposed to the democratic scene. So this specific idea has now been is admired by the different political parties, because they are now witnessing it as an opportunity to participate in the political scene actively, and therefore the constitution have been framed in a way that provide each and every sector, as well as ethnicity or party in the country, to be represented in the constitution. Therefore, each and every sector or party have had their share in the parliament. That is the share system that I told you about. Another problem here is the corruption. The corruption that spread is actually one of the reasons why we are witnessing the current scene. It's actually rooted in all of the sectors in the country. It has an impact on investment and, of course, on rebuilding what was destroyed. And therefore, the country is suffering from this specific huge problem, because it has a very big impact on the life of the individuals and the people and their lifestyle and quality of life. Another problem here is the problem of the militias, the non-organized groups that are working and existing in the country. There are, of course, great impacts and implications on the political system or the political scene. And of course, we know that, I don't want to generalize, but most of the parties, the political parties, have their own militias and armed forces or armed troops. Therefore, and that of course poses a lot of questions from the people's part. And let's now say that these non-organized forces, where of course the ones behind those, the number of killings and assassinations of the youth that have been, of course, participating in the uprising, and therefore these specific sections and sectors have been playing a very important role in the shaping of the political scene, and therefore the different parties hope and different sections hope to be represented in the parliament, to have or to play an active role in the in the political scene. Another problem here is the tribalism and the tribal fights and conflicts, and we can see now the politics and the politicians, they are trying to gain the favor of certain sectors or certain tribes, and they would say that this specific party is affiliated to that, and this specific party is affiliated to that, and that of course had been playing a very important role in the political scene. So we know now if a certain party is following specific tribe or working with a specific tribe or a specific sector or a sect, therefore those who follow are going to vote for the specific party. Therefore, we know that another point here is that all of the people on the table currently are, yes, they are rivals, but when it comes to distributing the spoils of war, they are very good friends, and they're willing to share. but we need to know where is the country, where is the governance, where is the human rights, where are the human rights. We know that we have thousands and thousands of missing individuals that we up until this day do not know where are they. And of course this specific political scene is forcing a lot of people to live under certain circumstances. Therefore we need to pause all of these worthy questions that we need to ask about and think about. And finally is the absence of a civil country. Iraq currently is living in the phase of no country. Sorry, you have 1 minute left. Yeah. So where is the state of law? Where is the state of civil society? Where is the opposition that can freely speak and give and have an important role? So the state of no state currently is the dominating condition, and therefore we are just here aspiring for a better future despite being distributed around the world. So I would also agree with Dr. Bonke's opinion that the participation or the turnout is going to be very low. Despite the fact that the young people have been calling for an early election, yet they are going to boycott it, or the majority of them are going to boycott it. So I believe that we are going to be in an endless cycle. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm sorry for taking too much of your time. Thank you, Dr. Huda, for your participation.
Professor Delaware Ala Ad-Din, founding president, Middle East Research Institute in United States of America, for his comments. بروفيسور معنا ولا؟
الدين قربت
مش مسموع صوتك بروفيسور.
Sir? Marhaba. Marhaba. We hear you, Professor. Go ahead. Thank you very much. I'm Delaware Ala Ad-Din. I am originally from Erbil, Kurdistan of Iraq. Thank you for the invitation. My colleagues talked a lot about some details and also some predictions. I am not very fluent in Arabic like others. You know that I am Kurdish originally, so I usually don't differentiate between the masculine and the feminine, so I beg your pardon in advance if I mix the two. So let me start first by saying that as Iraqis, all the factions, without an exception, we failed to translate the constitution to a roadmap and to a democracy that is clear and to a transparency and accountability. However, the elections mean a lot to us. Without the elections, al-Maliki could have stayed in power more than 1 decade. Without the elections, the deep state could have stayed stagnant without satisfying partially or totally the needs of the people. So we know that it is not up to the expectations of foreigners, but we have to acknowledge that if the voters are participating hugely, they can contribute to change. But still, I say, despite the change of the electoral system and the electoral law, the game is not changing in politics. The outcomes of the next elections, in my opinion, will result in giving the opportunity to the same elite which determines the agenda. But with different numbers. So the big picture will not change. However, at the micro level, I hope that you are hearing me, the moderator. I hope that you are hearing me. We hear you. Go ahead. Continue, please. Professor, go ahead. So the change regarding the big picture, it will not change a lot, but in the districts and the cities and towns, there will be surprises regarding who will be the winner here or there. However, the powerful electoral system and the big actors will be capable of staying in the first instance, which means that they will forge the future government and form the next government. And I would like to explain why the big picture will not change. Partially because the Sadr bloc will make victories. We know that they might get less seats compared to the past, but they will make victories. Al-Fatah bloc is not as strong as Sadr bloc, but they will have successes as well. And also there are the small parties like Al-Hikmah and Dawlat Al-Qanun of Al-Maliki and others who are considered small actors. So this is not going to bring a big change. We know in advance that Sadr bloc will be together with Al-Fatah and they cannot form the government alone, and you will have to resort to some other parties. Regarding the Al-Halbusi bloc, they are in a good shape and maybe they can win big parts and a big share, but those who have small names and figures, they will not gain a lot, in my opinion. Professor, the Kurdish, there is a problem in the connection. Can you, Professor, make sure that your connection is smooth and working properly? If you can try talking without the camera, you are free to do it. Is it better now? Okay, maybe you can continue now, doctor. So we talked about the Shiites and the Sunnis. Also, the Kurdish bloc will not change. I think that there will be no big changes in the coming elections. Maybe there can be some alliances. So I think that those who are sitting in the round table will be the ones who will decide who will be the president of Iraq, the prime minister, and the president of the parliament. The Shiites do not allow themselves to form in alliance with the Kurds and the Sunnis government. It's why the Sadr bloc and Al-Fatah would not be in the government, and this will contribute to deciding who will be the prime minister. The positions usually, and as I told some observers and foreigners, I tell them that the presidency will remain Kurdish. The Kurds will not give up this position, despite the fact that some suggested that the Sunnis should also hold the position of the presidency. The Kurds and the Sunnis insist on that point. I think that the Ittihad al-Watani, the National Union, will take the prime minister position. Maybe it will not be easy, as some expect. Mr. Al-Kadhimi has his chances, but he is not the only candidate. And he is not the compromised candidates. هناك العديد من المرشحين. Among these candidates, حيدر العبادي, فائق زيدان, and قاسم الأعرجي, أسهل العيداني, and the list is long and goes on. So there will be surprises about who will hold these positions. At the end of the day, we have to reiterate that the big picture will not change dramatically. Those who are conducting the agenda will remain the same. Regarding the districts, the October youngsters failed their round because they didn't coordinate with each other. They didn't organize their protest, and they were trapped by the authorities. Not because they have been compromised and infiltrated, but because they have been excluded in voting. Because when in majority they decided not to vote, they were trapped, because those in power do not care about democracy. They care only about winning. So the focus of the international community on the constituencies and the percentage of voting, of course, this is not a big deal and a big issue for those who want to hold power. But for those who want the open and public legitimacy, those ones want to win the vote of the people or get high percentages. When the government will be formed, usually in Iraq, this takes a long time, 4 to 6 months. This time, we hope that there is an acceleration of the process, because once the results get approved, you have 1 minute left. I'm done. I leave you the minute that you gave me. Thank you very much, Professor Ala-Din Delaware. Now let's welcome Raed Al-Hamid, and he is an independent researcher from Iraq. He will talk about the chances of the change. Mr. Raed, you have the floor. I welcome you all. Mr. Raed, I think you have a problem. We do not hear you very clearly. Can you speak longer, please? Do you hear me now? Partially, but not entirely. Continue, please. Proceed with your speech. Now I think we can hear you. Go ahead. In the course of time, the crises continue, and some of the difficulties become difficult to be solved. I think that after 2003, Mr. Raed, you still have a problem in the connection. Go ahead. Is the voice clear now? Yes, yes. You have the floor. Go ahead. Is my voice heard? Yes, go ahead. Is my voice heard? Yes, go ahead. Do you hear me? The voice is clear. Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Raed, go ahead. So I will continue. As I said, let's talk about the government. There are some statements about the presidency of the next government. However, Nouri al-Maliki, the ex-prime minister, has some strength, like the loyalty of the military leaders. Also the security forces. However, Iraq is in need of a statesman. Some are having the ambitions to run Iraq, and Iraq needs a strong statesman. There have been some attempts to eradicate some armed forces which were missing with the security of Iraq, and this resulted in deep divisions and divides with the Sadr bloc. This can influence some actors, and I think also that we can see some exclusions of some big names. The Al-Fatah alliance is another option. But this represents some political wings, and there are observations and remarks about the links with Iran and foreign influencers, and this alliance is considered to be an actor that implement the agenda of Iran. And of course, there are the protesters. The third option, which is the Sadr bloc. It can have victories and it can be the main candidate to form the government with others. But there can be a challenge in choosing the independent candidates. In my opinion, Mr. Raed, you have 1 minute left. Mustafa al-Kadhimi, in my opinion, came to power regardless of the political ramification. Al-Kadhimi is known to be having some relations with some leaders in the political arena of Iraq, which means that an independent candidate, the voice is cut. So this is not going smoothly. Even if they form the biggest bloc in the parliament, it is difficult to judge whether there will be a trust by the parliament. What is most probable is that Mr. Raed, I think that your time expired.
Can you hear me? Yes, if you would just allow me to interrupt, thank you very much. The time is up. Can you hear me? I think I can hear you. Yes. Thank you very much for your. Yes, we could hear you, and thank you very much for your input. We have a number of questions from the viewers regarding the Iraqi elections. Dr. Bilal, the first question is towards you, is for you. Who are the biggest losers from the traditional powers in elections according to the new information in the new input in the elections? Thank you very much. That's a very valid question. I would like to go back to what Dr. Monqad have said regarding actually finding answers to those questions is actually hard because there is a radical change in the law as well as the whole process of elections. That's one side. The other side is that everyone is fearful of these elections. Everyone is fearing the unexpected or the black swans, the irregular or the unexpected outcomes. So actually everyone is probably afraid to lose certain leverage or presence, but there is also the fear of the demonstrators to go back to the streets to perform certain type of pressure on the political powers. But there is going to be radical change. There's not going to be radical change in the political scenes. Yet there are going to be a number of changes in the number of chairs probably, but no radical change is going to happen. I would like to agree with my colleague when he said that Al-Fatah party and of course they are going to come back as the winners in the Shia. Therefore, there is going to also have a certain type of change or slight change is going to happen in the Sunni party as well as the Kurdist. Yet the major change is the fact that we're going to have new faces, new independent candidates, or as well as new voices that they would choose to be part of the House of Representatives and be there not just because of the party is pushing them forward, yet it is going to be due to the personality and the as well as the actual individuals' ideas and perspectives, and that is going to be different whether it's going to be from the quota or the female factor. Usually they are more loyal to the party more than they are loyal to the topic or the thing that they are discussing in the parliament. Therefore, I believe I would like to rephrase the statement here is that the responsibility is going to be more on the shoulders of the voters from the previous years, different from the previous years, against as opposed to the benefit of the political parties. But as for the external element, there is the oil, the arms, as well as the political powers and its shifts. So I don't really expect, as said by Dr. Munder, that the turnout is not going to be much higher. But a new political trend is happening now, which is the demonstrations is going to force the hands of the elite to do their part as to protect the country and fulfill the demands of the streets with the claim of we need a country and a homeland. Thank you very much. I have another question here, and it's from two parties. The first one: what are the possibilities of Mustafa Al-Kadhimi to form the upcoming government? And in case he is back, can we say that his the national framework is going to continue or not? I don't really want to predict anything specifically in the specific elections because I'm speaking from a scientific researcher point of view. Expectations should be based on input or information. The input and information from this specific election is the most ambiguous one. Therefore, we cannot expect the results. Al-Kadhimi has his own limitations he has his own chances as much as anybody else. I'm not going to say that his chances are higher than the rest, but I just want to say that it's going to be down to the negotiation power, basically. So Al-Kadhimi has, without a doubt, the highest probability from any other candidate that is, of course, we hear of them now, specifically in relation to the international relations. All of the countries in the region, he has good relations with all of the countries in the region, except probably Iran. Yeah, yet he has a level of acceptance in the region. Another problem here is Al-Fatah. So Al-Fatah, they do not really prefer him. So I believe that Al-Fatah party is going to have certain type of internal split because some of them approve of him, the others are not. So the power or the number of seats by which Al-Fatah is going to acquire is going to determine whether or not they are going to be supporting Al-Kadhimi. Another thing, the capability or the ability of Al-Halbousi and Barham Saleh to stay. If they are able to stay, these are two more factors in favor of Al-Kadhimi. So actually, I cannot really predict because the outer changing or outing variation or element or input is working towards Al-Kadhimi, specifically from the US part. That is also in his favor, yet the Irani part is unknown. Yeah, but we can say Al-Fatah, فالواحد as we say in Iraq, we cannot really predict what is happening because of the various or the continuous changes in the external circumstances. Therefore, I cannot really predict anything from a scientific point of view. I believe that his chances are higher now, and he was very smart not to take part in this election. And that is, of course, is why he has more chances. So my question is for Professor Dalal Al-Aidin. Is the scene in Afghanistan may be repeated specifically by the withdrawal of the U.S. forces, but the end of the year? Another part of the question is, would it be possible for the Iranian leverage or the Iranian leverage to be as it was before Al-Kadhimi? Actually, as for the second part of the question, the Iranian leverage did not change. It didn't diminish. It is actually the same or maybe more. Yet probably Iran's policies and direction may change on how to deal with Iraq and the Middle East. But the Iranian leverage is still here and it's going to increase. As for the Afghanistanian scenario, it's not going to happen. It's not going to be repeated in Iraq. I would like to remind you that Afghanistan scenario is a second one. That's the second one. The first scenario was in Iraq when the U.S. forces have been withdrawn in 2011, and Daesh forces during the Obama administration. And at that time, Biden was the vice president. I'm sorry, the voice is cutting. I cannot hear clearly. Yeah. So Daesh or ISIS have taken probably 1/3 of Iraq due to the withdrawal of the U.S. forces. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Your face says you can't. Well, I can. I'm just taking notes. Yeah. Okay. The Afghanistani scenario actually happened in Iraq first, and it's been repeated in Afghanistan. President Biden at that time was the vice president, and now he is the president. So I don't think the scenario is going to happen for the third time in Iraq under the administration of Biden for a third time. So I do not really think it's in the interest of the USA for this to happen one more time. Afghanistan is different from the Middle East. Iraq is different from Iraq. There are vital interests in Iraq for the USA. Therefore, their presence in Iraq is different. The U.S. Afghanistani presence was a continuous bleed or a continuous draining of their resources and finances, yet their presence in Iraq has a furthermore strategic dimension. Their interests are much more complex in Iraq. In Iraq, we're not different. We're not like Afghanistan. If the American forces is to withdraw, we're not going to have internal explosion so that Daesh is going to take over. Actually, the Sunni regions that are under Daesh's control, the Sunnis actually refuse their presence, and the Iraqi forces and its presence ensures that Daesh is not going to come back, or ISIS is not going to come back, as well as the Kurdists' presence. So the absence of USA is going to result in the freedom of movement by Turkey as well as Iran. So the conflict scene and the result scene is going to be there, but it's not going to be like Taliban or the likes to take control. Actually, the American presence is symbolic, just to preserve their interests and to preserve or to keep the European and US alliances, because they're basically relying on them. Therefore, the absence of USA equals the absence of the West, because most of the Europeans, NATO, the Arab countries, most of them are depending on the American cover in Iraq. The last dangerous thing that I want to talk about here is that if the USA leave Iraq or kicked out or forced to leave, actually Iraq, they're going to lose their biggest financial as well as confidence, that the financial support as well as moral support that they have, that is helping them with the rest of the world. The security cover as well as a number of other elements that are going to be absent with the absence of the Americans. We call Iraq now a fragile country. With the absence of the Americans and their good intent, the Iraq is going to be called a failed state. Therefore, the Afghani scenario is not going to be exactly the same, but it has other type of risks on the level of the whole country itself. Thank you very much. I will suffice by that. Thank you very much, Dr. Delaware. The other question here is Dr. Huda Naimi. How can we draw out the Iraqi scenario in case of the Sadrists' loss in the elections as well and the winning of the state of law? Can you hear me? Yes, we can. I actually agree with Dr. Monk that we cannot really predict what will happen after the elections because, or due to the complexity of the situation, the ambiguity of the new step that would result from this new electoral law, the competitors, how are they going to implement or actually take part in the electoral or the elections in general? So we cannot really say anything right now. And as my colleagues have said, we have quotas. We have quota shares. We have Shia, we have Kurds, we have Sunnis. Each one know their role, know their share. So they have practice on how to increase their percentages through their crowd. We know that the crowds or the voters who are, for example, affiliated to Sadrists, movement are actually obedient and they follow their direction. So they are all going towards the voting choice, of course. So these voters who support Sadris are going to be there. So I cannot really say that they are going to, that I'm not going to say that the Sadris are going to lose. No, they have a very big following. And as I said, the specific following, they are following their references and their doctrine with very high proficiency. So I believe that they are going to be in competition with Al-Fatah Alliance, who also have very high chances and have a very big following as well. So let's remember that the public is of course going to work on the specific list. Therefore, I believe it is going to be something between the alliance as well as the Sadrists, to find probably a compromise or electing a government or choosing a president in between them. Yes, I believe Dr. Munqidh, you want to add something? Yes. What I want to add to what Dr. Hoda said regarding the chances of Said al-Maliki, I said that it's actually impossible to predict the results of this election, yet it's also almost positive that al-Maliki is not going to be the prime minister again, for a number of internal and external elements, the most important of which is his very strong disagreement with the Sadrists, who would never accept al-Maliki even if he won. Because at the end of the day, no one can actually form a government without political compromises and alliances in a way that provides or has the sufficient number of votes, which is 100 and I think, yeah. So specific number of votes to determine the government. Another thing is, during the previous week, Maliki have had a presence in the elections thing, whether through urging people to vote or through what is called the holy parts, I think. So we know that the al-Maliki do not really have high chances, in addition to the fact that the external powers are against al-Maliki. So I think that the chances of an individual from al-Fatah to be the prime minister is also weak, because there is almost an agreement that whoever is going to be the prime minister to be at least outside of these two parties. Any other probability that someone from al-Fatah or al-Maliki to be the prime minister, I think that's going to be very difficult. Yet I guess it's very difficult to happen, but it's possible in the light of this specific law. But according to the current factors, that's my opinion. Dr. Bilal, this is the final question. How do you see the future of the Iraqi Arabic relationship, specifically with Gulf countries, after the election, regardless of who's going to form the government? part of the blaming that used to be directed towards Iraq and the great Iranian influence is not just the Iranian intelligence in the investment of relationships inside Iraq, therefore militias, political aspect or social aspect, but also another blame is aimed towards the absence of the other. The strong presence of Iran is a result of the absence of an alternative. So the openness with the Arab world, Turkey, and we have seen the Baghdad summit that has been attended by a number of countries from our neighboring countries, also France, that was the new initiative to compete with the Iranian role, not only to eliminate it, but also through Iraq hosting more friends. As you can see, the Arab world is very important. Turkey is very important. Also, despite the fact that there are issues with the fight with the Kurdistani forces and the KKK, and despite the issue about the rivers and water problem, yet the external relations in Iraq needs more balance. And of course, one of the success factors in this regard is having a government to restore this balance. There are new roles in Iraq after 2003 is for Iraq's government to do not just to be the mediator, but also a mediator between Iran and the Gulf countries, and also to have Iranian Saudi talks hosted by Iraq, and also the Arab welcoming to the Iraqi independences and minimizing the Iranian influence. Yet all of these diplomatic relations and visits by the presidents should be translated into projects on the grassroots level that is felt by the Iraqi individuals, for example, facilitating travels, facilitating cultural exchange on the university and cultural levels, academic level, in addition to the reiterating the fact that the state is the priority. Now, having an Iraqi state is the priority, not the military party interests. Across the previous 2 years, there has been an improvement in this regard, the internal side of the Iraqi relationships. We hope that the government would invest more on opening more natural relationships between the neighboring countries and Iraq. Thank you very much. And before concluding this session, I believe, Dr. Hamid, you had a technical problem. We couldn't really grasp the main ideas of your thesis. Could you please go through it one more time? Dr. Hamid? Mr. Hamid? Okay. Within just half a minute, I would like to ask all of the speakers to summarize the future perspective regarding Lyric. It's going to be a developmental one or otherwise. Please go ahead. Who do you want us to start? Please go ahead, Dr. Munkaz. I cannot really rely much on change resulting from this election. And on the contrary, I am fearful of what may happen and the political scene after the elections, especially if the results would increase the youth's disappointment, who are already frustrated, specifically on the southern part. This may add to an increase of anger as well as coalitions. And this time, it's going to be a very strong one. more than before. Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Dr. Bilal. The main point that I wanted to mention was that there is a mismatch between the expectations of the Iraqi people on the street, especially youths, from one side, and the political scene or system from the other. So the question for me was this specific problem. So would, or this gap, would the government be able to breach this gap, or are they going to fulfill the expectations of the youth, and by that they would bridge the gap between the government system in Iraq and the expectations of the Iraqi people? So we cannot really compare this specific system with the previous one, despite all of its disadvantages. Yet, honestly, this has a political side as well as a developmental side. We've spoken enough on the political side, but from the developmental side is to focus on combating corruption. This is a priority, as well as demands for for economic reinforcement or political development to open the door for the youth, for businessmen and entrepreneurs to find the capital for new businesses that is independent from government hiring. Another very serious demand to translate the oil or the oil fortune not as a curse, but as a fortune and a capital to develop the economy of Iraq, not just as an income that is spent in the previous networks that I said, that the whether for joining the army or for the government jobs. I would, Dr. Hoda, please go ahead. No, I would like to go last, please. Then Professor Darul-Aidin, please go ahead. Thank you. The reconstruction of Iraq and the supremacy of Iraq is no longer an Iraqi decision. Iraq have surpassed the point of no return from the point of being able to resurrect or come back up on its feet. The external policy of Iran, as well as the neighboring countries, specifically the regional powers, as well as the USA's policy, are very important in this equation. Yet, the elections may have a very important impact, especially if one of the outcomes of the election is government that is more loyal towards Iran, so their negotiation with the strategic dialogue with the USA may expedite the withdrawal of the USA from Iraq, and that may have drastic consequences, or it wouldn't be that much of a problem. So it basically depends completely on the shape of the government. But as institutions, as a state, Iraq is incapable, whether it's a weak government or a technocrat government or internal alliances government, is not really capable to find a strong government with the absence of a national winner, and also with the absence of the great individuals or the strong parties. Iraq is not capable to stop the external intervention, as well as the Iranian intervention. In addition to that, the hopes and the expectations, the hopes of the Arab world, as well as the American expectations, they're all expectations and hopes and aspirations to restore Iraq to its previous state, to help Iraq to have a national and Arabic and regional role. These are all hopes and aspirations. Probably the biggest part is going to be that all of our attempts should be aiming toward, all our efforts should be aiming towards ensuring stability inside Iraq first, and working on the economic sector, as well as security, as well as communication with the regional countries. And of course, this is one of the coming opportunities, because uh, we did not really make the best of the opportunities that we have been presented with internally or externally. So we need to focus on the short term. I think I cannot hear clearly. The voice is cutting. I believe there is a technical issue, Professor Dalwer. We cannot hear you properly. We cannot hear. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Yes, we can. If it wasn't really clear all the time. No, it was very clear, but only the last part. Could you please say that? Yes, I said our eyes and our focus should be on the instant solutions, the short-term solutions and short-term priorities, and bridging the gaps in the economy and in jobs and in the government, and focusing rather than focusing on long-term hopes and aspirations of bringing Iraq back to its glory. We need to focus on stabilizing the prices quickly, because we are adapting with we are talking about being able to adapt with the current collapse, not stopping the collapse, because it's already happening. So we hope that Iraq would adopt policies that would help the country, help rebuilding institutions, as well as helping the economy, providing job opportunities. These should be the priorities. As for aspirations and expectations that this specific government is going to be stronger than the previous or its predecessors, I don't think it's true. I think that this upcoming government is going to be a compromised government, is going to be a weak government. Any prime minister from the compromise is going to be a weak one. So any weak prime minister is not going to be able to force or enforce his ideas and vision, and restoring the monopoly of the government, or monopoly of power to the government. So I believe that the Iraqi government currently is not going to be able to do that. So they need to focus on the instant priorities. Thank you very much, Professor Dalwer. Dr. Raed, please, Mr. Raed, please go ahead. Mr. Raed? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Raed? I think still a technical issue is there. Please go ahead, Dr. Rahuda. I don't really rely much on the fact that the new elections is going to come up with a new vision, a new government. I don't really think this is going to happen yet. I want to note or indicate a certain point, which is the youth's movement is a faint light in a long journey that it needs to accumulate and go bigger and bigger to achieve its goals. I also wanted to what Dr. Bilal said, business women, because actually business women's actually is their role is very marginalized. They are always there, but it's not effective because they're democratic power. They only use it for democratic or for the show, or to show that we have women, but they are not really actively participating in taking decisions or shaping the decisions. I like this idea, and I want to also agree with Dr. Mokut that there is no is going to, or cannot really expect anything yet. Hope that this new youth movement would have its own impact after a few years. Thank you very much, Dr. Hodman. In conclusion, I would like to extend this extreme thanks and appreciation on behalf of Dr. Abdullah Al-Ali for all of the participants as well as the viewers who have enriched this specific event with their wonderful and rich opinions. And up until we meet again, I would like to thank you very much and send my sincere regards. Thank you very much and hope we meet again. Thank you.